It's mid-morning, and a Hadza man in northern Tanzania is lying in the shade of an acacia tree, half asleep. He hunted for 2 hours before sunrise. He caught nothing. He is not worried. He will eat today anyway. Someone in the camp always gathers something. By noon, most of the adults around him are doing the same thing. Napping, grooming each other's hair, telling stories, doing absolutely nothing productive. This is a normal Tuesday, and it raises an uncomfortable question. If life 40,000 years ago was a desperate fight for survival, why does this look like a vacation? Think about your own week. You probably work somewhere between 40 and 50 hours, and that's before you count the commute, the emails you answer in bed, the mental load of a job that never fully turns off. Add in the scrolling that eats your evenings, the errands that eat your weekends, and the vague guilt you feel whenever you're technically doing nothing. We've built an entire culture around the idea that exhaustion is the price of survival, that our ancestors had it worse, so we shouldn't complain. Hustle harder. Grind now, rest later. Somewhere along the way, being tired became a badge of honor, proof that you're serious about your life, almost a personality trait. But here's the part nobody tells you. For the vast majority of human history, our ancestors worked less than we do. Significantly less. In 1966, an anthropologist named Marshall Sahlins presented a paper that quietly detonated inside academic circles. He'd studied hunter-gatherer societies, groups still living the way humans lived, for roughly 95% of our species' existence, and found something nobody expected. These were not people clawing at the edge of starvation, rationing every calorie, one bad week from disaster. Sahlins called them the original Affluent Society. Not affluent in the sense of owning things. They owned almost nothing by design, since carrying possessions is a burden for people who move often. Affluent in the sense that actually matters biologically. They had enough, and they had time. Two things modern life treats as mutually exclusive, as if you can only ever have one. Decades later, anthropologist James Suzman spent years living alongside the Jew/Hoansi people of the Kalahari and the Hadza of Tanzania to test this idea directly, on the ground, over long stretches of real fieldwork rather than a single visiting season. His findings lined up almost exactly with Sahlins' decades-old data. On average, adults in these societies spent somewhere around 15 to 20 hours a week on activities that actually produced food. 15 to 20. That's not a typo. That's a part-time job by modern standards. Less than half of a standard American work week. The rest of their waking hours went to rest, socializing, storytelling, childcare, tool maintenance, and doing what can only be described, honestly, as hanging out. So why does this feel so wrong to us? Why do we assume the past was harder? Part of the answer is that we're picturing the wrong past. When people imagine ancient humans, they usually imagine farmers. And farmers really did have it brutal. The agricultural revolution, roughly 10,000 years ago, is when human work hours actually spiked. Farming means fixed land, which means you can't just walk away from a bad season. It means planting, weeding, and harvesting on a strict seasonal clock, storing grain, defending that stored grain from raiders, and working sunup to sundown because the crop doesn't care how tired you are. Skeletal remains from early farming populations show more joint damage, more malnutrition, and shorter stature than the hunter-gatherers who came before them. Agriculture wasn't the moment life got easier. For most people, it was the moment work stopped being optional. We inherited that mindset, not the hunter-gatherer one. We just pushed it back further in time than it belongs. Here's the evolutionary explanation, and it's the twist that changes everything. The human body and brain were never designed for sustained scheduled labor. They were designed for burst effort followed by heavy rest. A hunt is a short, intense expenditure of energy, minutes or hours, followed by long stretches of recovery, because recovery isn't optional, it's metabolically required. Muscles rebuild during rest. Cortisol needs to come back down. The nervous system needs slack or it breaks. Your ancestors weren't lazy when they rested under a tree for 6 hours after a 2-hour hunt. They were following a biological contract that kept them alive long enough to reproduce and raise children who survived. Rest wasn't the reward for work. Rest was part of the work. There's even evidence this extended into how they slept. A study led by sleep researcher Jerome Siegel tracked the Hadza, alongside 2 other traditional societies, using activity monitors, and found something that broke a popular myth. They weren't sleeping in 2 separate shifts through a fearful, watchful night the way some historians assumed. They slept in a single continuous block, went to bed hours after sunset, and woke before sunrise. Total sleep time close to what sleep doctors recommend today. What they didn't have was insomnia as a widespread complaint, or an alarm clock violently cutting a sleep cycle short every single morning of their lives. Now compare all of this to a factory floor in 1850, or a fluorescent-lit office in 2026. Neither of those environments existed when your nervous system was being shaped by evolution over hundreds of thousands of years. The 8-hour, 5-day, 50-week structure isn't ancient. It isn't natural. It's an invention, largely a product of industrialization, when factory owners needed labor to show up on a clock, rather than in rhythm with the sun or the season. And more recently, of a knowledge economy that figured out how to make work follow you home in your pocket, buzzing at 11 p.m. We didn't evolve to sit at a desk for 9 hours straight. We evolved to hunt for 2, rest for 6, and spend the rest of the day talking to people we liked. And this is where the paradox flips completely. It's not that ancient life was easy and modern life is hard. It's that ancient life had a rhythm, effort, then rest, then connection, repeating day after day for tens of thousands of years. And modern life broke that rhythm and called the breaking progress. We didn't get freer as we got more advanced. In a lot of ways, in terms of actual hours spent laboring, we got less free. So what did they do with all that spare time? This is the part that gets skipped in every documentary that wants you to believe prehistoric life was one long emergency, all spears and adrenaline. They talked. Anthropologists studying modern forager societies have found that a huge portion of the day, sometimes the majority of waking hours, was spent on conversation. Not survival planning, not strategy meetings about tomorrow's hunt. Just talking. Gossip, jokes, arguments, stories about the hunt that got exaggerated a little more with each retelling around the fire. One well-known analysis of Jew/hoansi campfire conversation found that the vast majority of it, after dark especially, wasn't about food or danger at all. It was social. Relationships, disputes, humor, and stories. Some of them clearly meant just to entertain, no different in spirit from a group of friends staying up late for no particular reason. Storytelling wasn't a luxury squeezed in after the real work was done. For long stretches of human history, storytelling and socializing functionally were the real work. Because a well-bonded group survives better than a group of exhausted strangers who barely know each other. Trust, alliances, shared memory of who helped whom last winter, that's not decoration, that's infrastructure. A group that laughs together and remembers each other's stories is a group that shares food without keeping score, warns each other about danger without being asked, and forgives mistakes instead of exiling the person who made them. That social glue built during all those unproductive hours was arguably more important to survival than any single hunt. Which brings us back to that man under the acacia tree. He isn't resting because he failed to catch anything and has given up for the day, ashamed. He's resting because rest, for the vast majority of human history, was never something you had to earn first. It was the default state. Work was the interruption. If that feels unsettling, it should. It means the bone-deep exhaustion so many people carry through their 20s and 30s isn't some ancient inheritance we're stuck with, some primal toughness we've simply lost. It's not just how humans are. It's a structure we built recently in historical terms, first with the plow, then with the factory clock, then with the phone in your pocket, on top of a body that was never designed to run this way. Your ancestors weren't tougher than you. They weren't built to endure more strain, more hours, more grind. If anything, they were built to endure less and to protect that limit fiercely, instinctively, because their bodies knew something we've spent the last few centuries slowly, collectively forgetting. Somewhere in northern Tanzania, that same man is still lying in the shade, and 40,000 years of evolution is telling him he's doing exactly the right thing.